A journey into the underground with Adam X. Sonic Room Podcast. Hi, I'm Adam X, and joining me today is one of the first and most respected women in techno, Electric Indigo. Her and I have a long-standing 30-year friendship that started in her days of playing raves in New York City. We sit down and talk about her career from the past to present. Sit back, relax, and enjoy it. So how you doing, Suzanne?
Hey,
it's been
Adam.
a minute.
I'm doing all right as long as I don't read the news. I'm fine. I'm happy that we get more sunlight and daylight, and it's been a long winter. But the world situation is very difficult at the moment for me. Yeah, as probably for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, we're still here doing it after all these years,
Yeah.
but it's not getting easier, that's for sure. But you know, I'm very grateful for the career I've had, and I'm sure you're the same with what you've done over the years. And
Oh,
it's
absolutely. I feel very privileged. I think we were lucky that we could start what we were doing in the 90s, or even before that. But, playing out a lot in the 1990s was very exciting.
it was for sure an amazing time. How did you get into DJing? Who inspired you to DJ, and like why did you get into it? In Vienna, you were living in Vienna at the time in the late 80s, right?
Yes. I got into DJing because I went to a small bar where a lot of art students were going, and a lot of my friends, and some people who were obviously not DJs, but just like regular customers were playing their favorite records there. And I thought, I'd like to do this too, because I was buying records already for some years, and I just asked, and they said, yes, let's try it. And the bar was called Trabant, a super small space in Vienna, and they didn't even have regular DJ turntables, but belt-driven turntables, and no DJ mixer. So I could not mix there, but I could just play like my favorite records, and people really liked it. I started out with like a lot of black music, like hip hop and funk and jazz and soul, but also some 80s stuff like Brian Eno and David Burns, and so it was a eclectic mixture of things. And then in the early 1990s, I learned about techno. Through DJ Hell, for example, but also through a house DJ from Vienna called Gebel. And Gebel used to work in a record store in Vienna called Black Market, like the one in London. And he gave me two records that really changed my life in a way. And one was Child's Play from DJ Rush.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah,
the
that's
other
me.
one was Fuel for the Riot from Underground Resistance. And I was like, what is this? It was kind of like the essence of what I liked in black music before, like funk and a lot of rhythm and drums. And it was just like condensed into one music form. And a lot of people who liked what I was doing in that bar, they could not understand my turn to techno, because for them it sounded like German fascist music. They thought techno is like march music and super stiff, and there's no funk and no soul. And I perceived it obviously very differently. And I would say nowadays I knew better. Anyhow, this also led to me not DJing in that small bar anymore, because on my regular day I arrived and all of a sudden there's another person already in place, and they did not even care to call me and tell me, well, with your new taste in music, we don't think it fits. They just put somebody else there. So that was my being fired from that small bar. And it became clear, like very soon after that Germany and Berlin is whereas it's more interesting for me than Vienna at that time. In particular, the Hardwax record store. And a few years after that all happened. In 1993, I got a call from Mark Ernestus from Hardwax, and he asked me if I could do like holiday replacement for Helmut, who was doing the mail order packages in the back room. And that's how I started to work in the legendary record store Hardwax.
They called
in
you
Berlin.
while you were in Vienna?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I was kind of like called one afternoon, and the next morning I stood in Berlin and I was like, okay, I'm here now. I want to work, because it was my dream to work in that store.
Was there no scene before you got into the techno thing in Vienna? Like there was no clubs that were playing techno, let's say in 1990, in the first wave of like, it would almost be even the second wave compared to England and Holland, right?
That's true.
Was there anybody that was running parties in clubs that you didn't know about until you got into it and went back and was like, okay, this is something going on here?
No, actually, there were rave parties. They called it rave, but they played a lot of like guitar music as well. That was a thing in the very early 90s to combine kind of
there was that
techno
like Stone
with
Roses and the Happy Mondays, this kind of like UK Manchester
exactly
sound,
this
right?
kind of thing. That I didn't like that too much.
Me neither.
But there were some really cool techno people already back then in Vienna. For example, DJ Glow, Daniel Lodig, Pure. There were already people, I think, like of course Peter Rehberg and Mego and Edition, which became Editions Mego later on. So a lot of eclectic, like electronic stuff already happened in Vienna, and some techno stuff too. But I was not really in touch because I kind of coined myself as a funk and hip hop DJ, and that didn't quite fit together. So I had to get techno credibilities first, and that was ideal. So I made the ideal move to go to Hardwax and then be the woman at Hardwax and the DJ from Hardwax.
So you met Hell, who wasn't from Vienna. He's from Munich, right? And you met him before you met all the Viennese. How do you say Viennese?
Viennese, yeah.
Producers, right? Like before you met Polsinger and Glow and everybody. So you met Hell first.
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
I met Hell because friends of mine, Horst Scheuer in particular, they were doing some parties in off locations, and they invited Hell, and they wanted to save hotel costs. So they asked me if he could sleep in my place. And that's how I met him. And we became friends then. And he was really a big supporter for me in my beginning DJ career. He even bought me records, or he put it on his Hardwax bill or something. And I had no money back then, and I went hitchhiking to DJ gigs and to gigs where I wanted to hear the artists. So it was quite adventurous for me.
I think we were all doing that. Not hitchhiking necessarily, but we were definitely making our rounds into other cities to see what was happening. It was it's kind of strange. I don't think people really do that so much anymore. Everybody just stays in their lane in their city. Maybe they travel to a big festival during the year, like Movement is something for Americans, but back then it was much more of a travel network of people going to parties in different places. Unless I could be wrong, but
I see it a little bit differently. For example, in Vienna, it was more common that people would stay in Vienna and then nowadays, like everybody who's interested in electronic music would come to Berlin, of course, at least for a weekend to go to Berghain. And so I see more traveling nowadays, or I see a rise in traveling over the past 30 years, let's say. Yeah, it depends, I would say.
Yeah, in America, as you've played there many times, and you've witnessed playing from DC to Baltimore to Washington. It was the whole interstate I-95, or you have in the Midwest, everybody from Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, everybody was traveling to all the different parties. It was very, very interconnected back then. I don't think people travel like that anymore at the parties in New York. And we get a lot of people coming from
That's
so many different places, like people, they would even just take buses out, like the rave bus, and
right.
promoters would hire a bus out and have all the ravers coming up from different cities. Definitely not a common thing anymore there.
Yeah, but I also remember that people from Upper Austria, for example, around Linz, would regularly travel to Frankfurt because they were all Sven Väth fans, and they would travel to Oman to be in that legendary club. Yeah, you're right, but I think they still do travel as long as something is hyped, like Berghain.
Yeah, of course. Berlin people, they'll travel to a city and stay the weekend to go to all the different parties, but to just go for the one party where they would drive on that bus and they would leave at like 10 in the morning from the rave and back to the city. I don't know if that's so common anymore. I'm sure that, of course, there's people that do it, but it's just
that's some dedication there.
People didn't have internet back then. People were a lot more disconnected, so traveling was a lot more something that people did more. I think also, people definitely more up for the adventure every weekend. Everybody's so sucked into the phones and being home and being online now. It's kind of a different world.
I think an important factor is that the music that was being played was also more different than it is now in different cities and different countries.
Very regional, the sounds.
It was more regional, at least. Yeah.
Every place had its own sound. Vienna had its very unique sound. It's every city. It's like music. The techno scene is very global now, and the music, you can't tell which place music comes from anymore. Back in the day, you could tell a record from Sheffield, from Detroit, from Chicago, New York, Frankfurt, Berlin.
Yeah, you could still recognize a record from the UK, though, if it's like
the bass stuff.
The bass stuff, exactly.
But they were, a lot of those techno guys, they were copying what the Germans and everybody else was doing in the early teen decades when they were coming back up with the techno.
And a lot of the British guys also moved to Berlin, and it got all closer together. But it's nice.
So back to when you started DJing, when did you get your first pair of 1200s? Were you like, I'm going to the big leagues now?
Well, as I mentioned, I did not have money. So to the contrary, I had huge debts because I ran out of money. And then the only way to survive for a while was to live on my credit card. And then at some point, that was over. And I went to my bank and I said, I want to become a DJ and I need credit. And apparently I was kind of convincing because I was really convinced that this is the way to go. And also, of course, I was still relatively young, and that's always better for getting credit from a bank. I was successful, and then I moved to Berlin and started to work at Hardwax and started to pay my debts off. So it was really like I had very, very little money, and every money that I could spare went into records. So it took me a long time to buy my first turntables. And back, like in the beginning of my career, I trained in front of the audience during my gigs, and it was sometimes really painful. It took me a long time to learn to beat match, but I could do that. It was people could tolerate it because I had great records, and the distribution was very different. So I had a direct comparison between Berlin and Vienna, and there were a lot of records that people wanted that would arrive, if ever, a year later in Vienna, for example. So I had the hot stuff that I could play, and I did a lot of mixing mistakes, but nevertheless, the music was good. So that's how it worked for me.
I mean, looking back in the day when I would come over, I wasn't really a great mixer, but then I would come to Germany and nobody was actually beat mixing. They were letting the tracks play out and fade out, and they mix the next one. We'll mention the big names.
Nobody.
But there were definitely big names that even played for us in New York that were doing that. I don't want to call people out, but that was a common thing. And then, but if you went to England, it was like, all right, I'm going to shit in my pants now because I got to play after or play before Colin Dale, Colin Favor, Groove Rider, and Fabio when they were playing techno. I mean, these guys were amazing DJs back then. And I remember one time Colin Favor had me on Kiss FM, and that mixes around so you could probably find it online. That was definitely train wrecking, and I was like, oh. But I was DJing only for 2 years, and to be honest with you, DJing with turntables back then, it took years to actually master. You had to play a long time, and it wasn't an easy thing to pick up.
Well, it wasn't easy for me, for sure. But finally, I had 2 turntables after maybe in 95 or so. I could afford to buy turntables, and I still have them at home.
95, you were already deep in it.
Yes, totally.
That's amazing, because I've already heard you by 94. You were playing amazing, so.
Thank you. Well, maybe it was 94 that I could buy the turntable.
And you know what? Back then, if you made mistakes when you were DJing, the mixers didn't have EQs on the channel. You couldn't cover stuff up like you can really quickly now if you're like slightly off or whatever. It was like you were in it, and if you fucked up, you fucked up.
Yeah. But it could happen anytime. Sometimes needle jump because somebody jumps on stage, and it was happening all the time. And it was also. I think one trait of a good DJ was how to handle mistakes. How to get through that train wrecking and
Don't
how
show it
to
on your
handle
face,
it.
number one. Go with it.
Cool, offbeat, polyrhythmic beating.
We'll get angry at the records. Your rap fault. Yeah, because sometimes, you would play records like, a perfect example would be like KLX Shelby, My Medusa on Transmat, and the edits are so off on that. And if you played records that had these off edits, they would just throw the whole mix out of whack. So sometimes it wasn't your fault.
Sometimes it wasn't. There are a lot of old tracks where the obviously the sync is like fluctuating, and the tempo is fluctuating. Yeah.
And then there were producers that sometimes like to just start the drum machine. It's not really MIDI. It's
funky style of production.
It's happened. I know the records that do this, and you have to know exactly the part. There was one of my all-time favorite records is Random Access, Give Your Body to Freedom.
Oh yeah,
and it had that bad edit at the end, which they reissued the record and they fixed it, right? But if you didn't know exactly where that was, it was.
Always wrong. Yeah. And it's so mean towards the end of a track, right? When you are already mixing in the next track. You had to know your shit.
It's not very common to do that nowadays. I haven't been in a position where like something went out of whack like that playing on CDJs.
It happened but there are some tracks I'm really like very meticulous when I prepare my tracks in Rekordbox, and especially what concerns the grid. So I make sure that the grid is correct. And I come across, every once in a while, I come across a track where something changes, like the one, for example, changes. So it's where the two should be all of a sudden is one, like a weird off edit. It happens sometimes. It even happens that the tempo changes. Some people still do funky stuff.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the stuff goes off slightly when I'm playing them, because I'm still pitch mixing when I play. I don't use the beat sync, but where it goes into like train wreck mode, where you're like. When somebody skips it, like you said,
Yeah.
Wow, So
and the funny thing is, I think people oftentimes, like the audience, liked it. they
There's a human error
like,
to it.
because it's human, it's something like unpredictable happening, and something. I mean, of course it depends how you handle it, and if it's like regularly, like every beat, every mix is not right, it gets super annoying. But if it happens like once a night, it can be like a exciting break.
Yeah, it's like having two left feet for a minute, right? So you arrived into New York pretty early on. How did you wind up there? What was that mission about? You came like 92, if I remember correctly.
I
Or was it
think
93?
93. It was for the. I came, like I played at Limelight the first time, the night the World Trade Center was bombed for the first time. That was in 93. I try to remember how I ended up there. It was. I stayed at Moneypenny. Do you remember Moneypenny?
I do
And
remember she
the
did Brand
Bucks
X and
newsletter, Brand X. I stayed with her, and she had an apartment in Battery Park, so it was right around the corner from World Trade Center. We could even feel the
oh, you felt it.
yes. And I'm not sure who invited me. It must have been the people at Limelight, and my connection probably with Hardwax and DJ Hell, and but I can't remember
You didn't come with
exactly.
Pulsinger or Tunakan and them?
Pulsinger was there, not with Tunakan, but with Helmut Wolfgruber. Patrick Pulsinger at that time was in New York, and he became friends with Abe Duque and also with Moneypenny, and they were hanging out in the office, like below in the basement of Palladium, and yeah, so I was also meeting up with Patrick Pulsinger during that time, and I got my eyebrow piercing in New York on that occasion too. But yeah, that was the first time at Limelight, and I came back relatively often. I used to play in New York relatively often.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was our we had a rivalry with them, as you probably know, if you remember. We were doing Storm Rave and they were doing their nights. So we weren't really going there that much in 93 because the drama got a little heavy at that point. But in 91, 92, it was amazing. Limelight was a great club, and there's nothing, I can't really equate it to anything else I've ever been to. It was actually, even without the dark rooms that Berghain has, I think it was way more decadent. People really doing crazy stuff in there.
Very crazy, very decadent. I
Yeah.
mean, no wonder the crazy Club Kid stories and Michael Allen and all these going up to murder and cut up bodies, and it's really crazy.
Crazy,
like,
but on the party level, not so much the horrific stuff they did. because there was also the hit that Lord Michael took out on my brother with the mafia, that they jumped in front of his hospital that has 100 stitches in his head from that, or had. And but as far as the energy in the room, because they really let like everybody in. You could be the craziest of craziest freaks, or you could be the working class kid from way out in Long Island, and everybody got in. Well, not everybody. They had the door. But the mix of it was really something I've never seen before in clubs before.
That's true. There were a lot of artsy people, a lot of super normal New Jersey people. Once I played there, and all of a sudden the dance floor was full with sailors dressed in their white uniform. That was quite funny.
Yeah,
like U.S. Navy.
And it's crazy because everybody was really on the same vibe in there. So it was a really intense energy because the music was new. It was a really special time in New York. And then you didn't come for a little while, and then I kind of discovered you. I brought you to play the raves later, like around 95. I think you started to come again, right? I was like, I don't know where I had heard you play that made me book you for Park Rave, but I had heard you somewhere, but it had to be in Europe somewhere. And then I was like, we got to book her. I want to have her play. And then you came, and then you became the staple in the scene. You were probably the biggest international, like outside of America, European DJ in the techno scene, especially on the East Coast and in the Midwest. I don't think anybody played more from Europe than you did in the 95 to like 97, 98 period. You definitely were running the show there from
Yeah,
Europe.
funny. Yeah, I got a lot of requests if I was married.
What's some of your best memories of playing at those raves? I have a few good ones.
Uh, hmm. That's hard to answer, really. I mean, Park Rave Madness on Randall Island was huge and it was overwhelming, but the level of excitement felt so unreal to me. So it felt like a funny dream in a way. Because I could not take it really seriously that people were so excited about me. That was a thing that I had a lot like over the years when I was a very successful DJ, that I could not take it seriously. I thought that people are a little bit out of their minds to think that I'm that great, and but I enjoyed it nevertheless. So
well,
you
weren't getting 20,000 euros like people get now, so that's even more crazy to me, right?
I didn't get that much.
No, that's what I'm saying.
No.
We didn't. None of us did back then. It was a bit more underground, right? So
yeah, it was very underground and it was fun, and I met a lot of fun people, especially in New York. I really liked to come to New York. I was hanging out. I think that was when I played at Park Rave Madness. I was staying at a woman's apartment who worked as a stripper. And so, of course, we went to that strip club, and one of her colleagues was really got really fond of me, and she was lap dancing me for free all the time. And I was like, oh, what is going on? I was never in a strip club before. And another friend of hers, he was into suspension and all this like body modification and freaky stuff. And I remember that we were taking the subway, and all of a sudden he did some artistic things with the pole. So he was like in the horizontal. he was kind of a how do you call that, artistic dancer, performance artist in a way, but unrecognized. And he was doing this stuff like in the subway, and we were going together. So it was really super remarkable and super special, and I enjoyed myself a lot. Yeah.
And what about, did you ever go to the West Coast to play back then? Were you playing in LA and San Fran, places like that?
A few times in LA, I think once. I remember that. It was called, I think, Scooby-Doo Rave, and it was...
Some of the names of the flyers, oh my God. I saw my flyer collection, I'm like, what were they thinking when they designed this stuff?
Really childish.
Like very childish stuff. Yeah.
And it was the time of the candy ravers, and they all had the candy really bracelets. Strange. And
we really tried not to push that in New York, but we would wind up on parties with these flyers all the time. I look at some of the graphic design, and I'm like,
it's funny.
But Park Rave they were special guys, because they kind of came to me and let me do most of the bookings for them, and there was one we did on Randall's Island. You weren't at that one. I got them to book Patrick Polsinger. I had Robert Hood and DJ Skull, and me, Heather, and
super
Frankie,
cool.
and it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was a bit smaller. It was a small one than what you played at, but they always booked the proper techno lineups, which was great, because it was a bit of a lull from like when we were doing Storm Rave, because the police started busting a lot of the parties in New York in like 93, 94. So there was a bit of a lull, and then they came back and they were able to get these amazing spaces that were legal, like Randall's Island. And if you remember, you played also the Armory Party. You remember this one with Run DMC, I think. I think you played that one. I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
You don't remember playing in these like kind of armory, these like sort of, it's where the National Guard actually stores their tanks in an emergency. You definitely played this one with Run DMC. I'm positive you were on that one.
And Run DMC performed that.
Yeah, it was Jam.
It was a DJ.
It was DJ. It was DJ. It was Jam Master Jay. Right, Jam Master Jam. Sorry.
Was there this stripper DJ then after us? Like, was it first techno, like really like super cool, and then this naked woman came on stage and blew everyone away?
No, I don't remember that. No, I don't remember that. But I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Been another party in
my
New
memory's
York.
vague with some of this stuff. But you were definitely on this party. It was in Brooklyn in Williamsburg, and you were definitely on that one for sure. And yeah, it was amazing time in New York. But what about, did you ever play for drop bass back in the day? Because those ones were amazing
Yes, I
too.
played in the Midwest, and also for SEC, for DVS1 in Minneapolis once. That was very cool. He invited all the UK guys, Christian Vogel and Neil Landstrom, and you played there too, didn't you? For DVS1 in Minneapolis.
No, I never played. I didn't know Zach
Oh,
back in the day. I never
okay.
played for him back then. I only played for Woody back then.
Yeah.
No, I played for other organizers, but
Yeah.
I mean, unless Zach was involved in something that I wasn't aware of, but he never mentioned to me.
Yeah, he used to be a promoter.
No, I know he's been around since that period.
And yeah, DJ ESP, Woody, yeah, for sure. I think I played for him. I played a few times in the Midwest, and sometimes in Chicago, a couple of times in Detroit. Once there was this Mississippi tour going from Minneapolis down to New Orleans, the only time I played in the South. Yeah, I did some fun things.
And what about back in Europe at this point? You were playing everywhere at this time too, right? In the by this 95 period.
Oh yeah, I played a lot, like from 93 to 2003 or 2008. I really played like every week, several times. And in Europe, it was mostly Germany, of course, more Berlin and Munich and perhaps East Germany, less Frankfurt, and not in the Ruhrpott area in North Rhine-Westphalia. I played a lot in France, particularly in the south of France in the 90s, because they liked hard techno there, and I played relatively hard. Yeah, that was my main area. Belgium sometimes, hardly ever in the UK, never in Italy before that.
Were you still working at Hardwax at that time? How many years you worked at Hardwax for?
3 years, until 96. Yeah.
That was still in the old location, right? On Reichenbach?
Yes.
Also?
Yes.
I went there. I vaguely remember that time. Yeah. A small shop.
It was a small shop, and most of the times it was quite crowded, in particular, obviously on Fridays and Saturdays, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah. But I moved back to Vienna shortly before they changed the location to Paul-Linke-Ufer. And now it's not on Paul-Linke-Ufer anymore, but in Kraftwerk, which I think is quite nice.
What about the scene in Vienna at this point? Was it starting to happen at least? Because I came a little bit later. I came in like 97 to play Gastrometer.
Yeah. Yeah, Vienna definitely was happening. In particular, the scene around DJ Pure. They did the loop raves, and they were always like super cool. And there were the so-called illegal micro raves. And I remember I played there only once. That was during the time I lived in Berlin. And one of the IMRs, illegal micro raves, was for New Year's Eve. And on the flyer, there was only a telephone number, and so you had to call. And there you got the information where the meeting point was, and then everybody had to meet at a certain parking lot.
That's an American way that we used to do it.
And from there,
the payphone, remember those?
And from there, everyone, the audience, the DJs, the organizers, everyone was walking like over a, wintry field towards the church with the PA, carrying the PA and the records and the bar and everything you need for a party. And then breaking somehow into this deserted church and setting up the PA. and we did New Year's Eve
I
party
missed all
there.
that stuff. That was the best. Those kind of
Yeah, it
parties were
was
the
funny.
best, man. You know, it's just, it's, you know, as we got older, we're playing in the clubs and it's very convenient. I miss that. I do miss that. I just miss the whole mission behind all of it. It's,
Yeah, but it's so hard to do that
yeah,
because
it's the gentrification everywhere
yeah,
is really cut down
yeah.
on venues everywhere.
It's I think it's due to the lack of space and the lack of free space where nobody, you know, takes care.
Yeah. It changed. It's crazy how like gentrification became like a global thing. You know, like it's really not a lot of cities in especially in the Western world where you can do stuff like that anymore. There's not a lot of abandoned locations anymore. Everything is just being
Yeah.
developed everywhere.
Yeah.
So onto your music production. What was I think the first record is the experimental one, right? For you?
Yeah, I did that together with Patrick Pulsinger and Adam Tunakan, and like most of the early stuff that came out, I did in other people's studios together with other people, and yeah, it was mostly like recording jam sessions on DAT and then taking a part of it and releasing it. And
I love that record, by the way. The Skyways
it's
is one of my
funny.
all-time favorite acid tracks. I have to pitch it down. It's a little too fast. Like, I
Yeah,
might
it's
have seen it,
160
but
BPM.
I have 3 copies of it now. I just got another copy. I'm always looking for a really clean one. But I mean, Damon was running an amazing label at that time too, with experimental. So you got a record on an amazing label too. So many good records from that period.
That was cool.
And then you hooked up and you did some stuff with Mr. Ingmar Koch. Right?
Yes. Ingmar and I were
Fever.
friends, Dr. Walker, and I was a huge fan of the whole Jungle Fever records, like crazy, distorted, acid techno.
Amazing stuff.
I thought it was really funny, and I loved the vinyl and all the engravings and colored vinyl. And Ingmar used to have direct access to a pressing plant. So from his studio, he could go to the pressing plant and throw the colored vinyl grains into the machine and press the records.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, he used to give me the stacks. They would give me the stacks of records, all the color vinyls, 100 copy limited editions. Nobody was really doing it like that wild. It's so underground. It's very cool.
Very underground, very cool, very crazy in a way too. Yeah. And yeah, it took me quite some time to get into properly producing my own music, and I got more into it through accident and being booked to play live in Vienna with another person, Mia Zabelka, who was playing avant-garde kind of violin, and someone just booked us, and they asked me, and I had nothing better to do than to say, yes, sure, let's try it. And so I kind of stumbled into this whole field of improvised experimental kind of music, and from there got also then after Mia, that project held for a couple of years, but then I used to do a lot of work with Pia Palme, who is a proper composer of academic new music, and so I got into this second kind of thing in my music world, like, how should I put it? The second stream of my musical identity, in a way. The experimental, more on the academic side. And it was fun because it taught me how to, get rid of the typical expectations people have on the dance floor. Also typical expectations a DJ like myself would have of a record. So it gave me a lot of freedom in finding new sounds and experimenting with form and sound. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's a big change when you do that. When I started doing
Yes.
my ADMX 7.1 stuff and experimenting with lower tempos and just offbeat rhythms, and there's just so much more space to do things with sound that you normally can't do when you're making a 4/4 track. It's so, you feel so limited sometimes because you're trying to
Yeah.
make music that make people dance, and you want to make sure this is going to work on the dance
Yeah.
floor. And when you do this kind of music, it's just a free range. You just feel way more open.
Exactly. I mean, there are certain rules so that the record would work on the dance floor. Rules for sound, rules for structure. And when you take away these rules, you can, you float in open space in a way. But then, on the long run, the academic world doesn't really do it for me either, because I confronted like some attitudes, I would say, like how, and this is also reflected, for example, in the collecting society GEMAs. They have classification for so-called serious music, E-music, and entertainment music, which is called U, like Unterhaltung.
Okay.
And it means practical value. Like the serious music gives you a higher percentage of the revenues, whereas the Unterhaltungsmusik, the entertainment music, is of lower value for the collecting society GEMA. And that's an equal thing in Austria, but I'm a member
That's
of
crazy that
GEMA.
they who goes around and sits there and is a judge of that. Right.
And I even tried to challenge it because as a DJ and as a producer of electronic music, I'm automatically in that entertainment section, no matter how experimental or how how few people actually want to hear this kind of stuff. And I even did a composition, a proper composition, written sheet music for an ensemble in Vienna, Klangforum Wien, which is one of the worldwide, one of the most renowned ensembles for new music, neue Musik. And I did a piece of sheet music for them, and it was performed by the ensemble, and there was, money coming in through GEMA, and I see it's classified as entertainment music. And I argued. I tried to make an argument and submitted the partitur, the score, and they didn't change it. They didn't change the classification. It's quite annoying, but this is what I also feel or hear from people who actually have studied composition and who are like a fixed part in the whole academic music world. They kind of don't hold back to look down on people like me because it's not classically trained, and it's repetitive, and it doesn't fulfill like the academic necessities in certain aspects. So
just for the listeners out there, when we talk about GEMA is a publishing society that artists join to get royalties on their music.
yeah.
But GEMA is a very difficult company. It really is.
It's actually a collecting society.
I hadn't signed up for a publishing society until several years ago for the first time, because I never really thought for underground music it would gain a lot. And it would also wind up costing me, as I run a label, that I would have to pay myself, for the pressing of the records,
yes,
right? The
you have
mechanicals
to.
and stuff,
Otherwise,
right?
you're not allowed to press your record.
I don't, because I signed with BMI in America, even though I was live in Berlin. I signed with BMI because BMI doesn't really chase after the pressing plants.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like what GEMA was doing. If you remember, maybe like 15 years ago, they were really causing a lot of problems with the clubs in Germany.
Yes.
There were a lot of protests against them. And then I also had some friends that did a party that actually Monolake, Robert, played at, and they made a profit finally on one of their parties. And then Chris and Cozy had played on this party, And they never registered this event with Gemma, and then Gemma wound up coming and taking $10,000 from them and ruined the party. They never did a party again after that. And I was like, that's so fucked up, because all of us are working and they're paying everybody, and they had a great event. It was an amazing event in a train depot in Berlin, and they were going to do another one. And then Gemma came and got greedy, and then they take the money. And then what they do in these societies is that if you're not registered in as an underground artist and you play, they just put it in a big pot so all the pop artists get the money, you know?
Yeah, all the already successful people get the money. And that's the downside of this. You know, you could think, okay, it's fair that the people get paid whose music is being played, but as a matter of fact, that's not the case.
And it still isn't. It's amazing, because there's even Shazam now. They could just put a Shazam recorder in the clubs and let those whose music is registered to get paid off of it. But this is
not happening. You know? And also what Zach did with a slice would be another way, you know, to analyze the music, that the DJs just upload track lists, which is for most of the DJs is super easy, because most of the DJs play digitally and they have the history and they can just easily upload it. So there would be a lot of means to analyze what is being played in the clubs and for a fair distribution, but it's not happening.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like no matter what we do, we never get paid for our music properly. In the old days, it was the labels that were big, and everybody's like, I'm going to them, and then they would just screw everybody over, and nobody would get their royalty money. And that's still a problem in these days. Labels I've worked with that still never gave me the money that I'm supposed to get for my records, and running away, well, I know how much I'm supposed to get, right? So,
yeah, that's right.
Like, but so back onto the music making part of things. Are you mainly hardware or digital? Or software?
I totally.
Software.
I'm mostly working in software. Before that, I used to play with my Multi-Moog and the MS-10 and my 808 and the Yomox 09 and I only with hardware. And at the same time, a friend of mine who is also a Female Pressure member, Donna Neda from Hamburg, she told me, well, my old school friend, they are like, and also I have heard of that software already. That somebody came up in Berlin with a software that is ideal to play live with. So I used to work a little bit with Logic before that, I think, and maybe with some other stuff, but not very much. And it was, for me, it was relatively cumbersome to work on a computer, like editing MIDI clips or so. I always did this on hardware and with a mixer. But yeah, so I heard of that software that would be intuitive and easy to play live, and actually made to play live. And the name is Ableton Live.
I love Ableton. I haven't used hardware since 2003, 4. Just never went out and bought any of this stuff. Just all in the box. I know, what? There's a lot of people out there like, but you know, it's infinite what you can do in Ableton, so I don't really see an
absolutely
it's stuff. And I like being able to save everything in one shot and just come back to it. Or I like working on multiple projects at a time, 2 hours on one track, 2 hours on another track, circle back.
That's a good idea.
Years, you know, because you know, in the old days, if you were using analog stuff, you had to leave everything up on the board for days on end just to finish that one track, and then you weren't feeling it, or somebody came over to switch something off. Complete nightmare. On to the next subject, female pressure.
Yes.
So let's get into that a bit. When did you actually first come up with the idea to do it, and what was the reasoning behind it?
Well, the reasoning behind it was that I always came across, touring as a DJ, I always came across remarks about my gender. So people were really surprised to see a woman, and the people approached me to ask me about it, even like perceived silly questions like how is it as a woman to DJ, and as if it were anything different apart from the stupid questions, of course. And then the second thing I noticed was that people didn't know about my female colleagues. I had a lot of friends already, or I knew about other women who were DJing or making electronic music. And people who approached me showed like a high level of ignorance about these other women. And it was usually I got involved in some conversations at 3 a.m. in the club, either before my set or after the set, and my mind being on a very different subject, in particular music and playing music and concentrating on my set. And so at some point, when you wake up the next morning and you think about the things that didn't come to your mind when you were in a discussion. So I thought, okay, I need to systematize it. At the same time, in the late 90s, it became clear that the internet will be an important medium, and that it could be ideal as a relatively time and space independent source of information. So this is what I wanted to create. I wanted to create a kind of a resource, a knowledge resource where people could find other women. At that time, I was concentrating on other women, and then find more information about them. Ideally, a database that can be searched by various criteria. This is how I came up with the thing. So I started to collect contacts, and at first in 1998, Female Pressure came out as a simple HTML list because I didn't have a person who could program a database, and I'm not a programmer myself. So it took a little bit until 2001 when somebody referred me to Andrea Meyer, who is a media artist and open source expert, who actually programmed the database that is still running up today, and it's the functionality is very Web 1.0 still, but we're working actually on the new version. I've been working a lot in the past years, and hopefully this year, finally, we will be able to launch the new version of the website and the database, and it will be very nice. So from the beginning, it was clear that I wanted to include visual artists as well, because I think the electronic music scene and the club culture is very closely related to graphic design, for example, for flyers or cover artworks, but also for VJing in clubs or for audiovisual art. And I wanted it to be international. I wanted to include like all varieties of electronic music, including academic electronic music, because I was already interested in that too. So now we have like over 3,100 members from 86 countries around the globe, and it's a very informal network, grassroots network, no like legal form of organization, no budget. So everything that is being done with Female Pressure or from Female Pressure is based on voluntary work. And I think the most important project that we realized over the years is our facts study, where we started to analyze the gender proportions in electronic music festival lineups. And we were able to collect data from 2012 to 2023. And we published the last study in 2024 a year ago in March 2024. The project is now in we stopped the project because the team was kind of burnt out. It's an incredible amount of work, and but we fostered the discourse around gender parity in electronic music, and I think it changed a lot. Also, female pressure has been changing a lot over the years, so we are now explicitly including non-binary and transgender artists. And we are also an explicit anti-racist network. So we try to have an intersectional approach, and it's not always easy. Sometimes there are like difficult discussions, and we have to try to dismantle powers, hierarchies, or power structures within the network too. So it's not only on the outside.
What if it's some sort of music in electronic music that we all hate? Like I don't want to insult anybody genre-wise. Are they allowed in, or is it just more for techno people?
As I said,
house, right?
I wanted to include all types of electronic music. So
if it's playing pop, cheesy electronic music, they're welcome.
They're welcome.
Okay.
It's not it's not the quality filter. The whole thing. It's And then a lot of people start out with cheesy music, and then if they stay with it, they usually evolve, and not everyone starts as a genius, but genius comes from working a lot, I guess.
Why do you think in the 90s that there weren't not a lot of women, but more women playing? I mean, there were, obviously Heather, who was my partner back in the day, that was playing mainly in the US, and K-Hand, yourself, Miss Djax was obviously huge back in the day, Marusha. There were definitely women playing, Brenda Russell, Monica Cruz.
Yeah.
Why do you think that more women, do you think women were intimidated to walk into a record shop to buy records or something? I mean, it was mail order. You could have gotten records. Why were there so little women DJing back then compared to now?
If you think about how do you become a DJ, it's because you are excited about something, and usually you become excited about something because you are in an environment where you are surrounded of people that are excited, and that where you can do something together.
But there were always a lot of women in all the crews. There was always a mix in the parties, the raves, promoters, right?
And there were a lot of female DJs too that are not famous, and they're completely forgotten in history.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not saying that the number was the same. There might be a lot of reasons. I think a lot of things come together when you look at the reasons why a certain gender is underrepresented or in a minority in a professional field. One of the reasons might also be financial reasons. Men or boys always have more money than girls or women. Another reason might be, the expectations, what people would expect from you, how you're being brought up. I know that. I had really a lot of help, and for me personally, it was a huge advantage that I could start as a DJ being a woman, because one of the things that a no-name DJ needs is to stand out. And if there are not many women around and you happen to be female, that's dodgy, but it is a trait that makes you stand out. So it can be a little bit of help in the beginning. It sounds really silly, but that's how I perceived it.
Where's your stance on the social media and using people's looks to propel them as a DJ compared to techno in the 90s, which was pretty much faceless? for most people. People didn't care about a look. You didn't have to look a certain way. You could. It didn't.
Well,
It didn't matter.
Adam, I have to contradict you. It wasn't faceless in the 90s. I remember a lot of.
Wasn't a lot of pretty boys.
No,
there was a lot of male model DJs back then.
There was.
I mean, it was faceless because there was no real internet. You had to, unless you were on a cover or something, or in a magazine or something, you had to be pretty big level to be in the mags,
but people had promotion photos. I remember quite a lot of. They were made like set cards, like cards of paper with a photo printed on it. And I remember that quite a few of my female colleagues had these kind of pin-up photos where they would hold like vinyl records in front of the breast to cover it, and otherwise naked, like somehow 1950s pinup photos being made in the 90s. But the social media is a different thing. Of course, I think there's also more and more pressure on men to. I see more and more topless male DJs.
Yeah, I mean,
being
the male.
successful.
I would say that the
six packs and
looks became a lot more important whether you're male or female in the last year,
yes.
or transgender or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
It's just people more focused on looks than ever before. I don't really think in the 90s people were focused on looks. I don't remember people going, oh, look at her, she's so hot if she's playing, or the guy or whatever. Nobody really cared. It didn't really. It was.
It's not true. Maybe you did not come across that, but I heard countless times, why don't you smile? You're so much prettier when you smile, from people in the club who were.
Well, you were pretty tough back in the day with the bald head. You were like one of the definite few women that can rock the bald.
Yeah, but it's
like
completely inappropriate.
Right? No, of course, if they say something, but.
And it is a classic. It's like what so many women have heard. Smile, it makes you look prettier, Or I heard.
I've walked the clubs in Berlin, Bar 25. You need to smile if you're going to get in here. I've had this happen to me before. It's been on the other foot a few times.
Yeah, comments about the how I look or my body. I always came across that. I had somebody say, well, I didn't go to parties where Electric Indigo played because she is so fat. And he told this to my face because he was kind of surprised that I'm not that fat. And what criteria is that? I don't know if any man ever heard something like this. But
I also think it depends back then on the parties where you get those comments. Some parties, I think in the raves that we were doing, people weren't thinking like that. But if you went to certain places where they weren't really that familiar with techno or the scene, it could be probably like that a bit, right? Would you say that? It was more in places where there was like not much of a scene, where people just didn't know any better? Rural areas. I think in the urban cities it wasn't really like that too much.
Yeah, maybe, but of course it can be worse. It's usually better in cosmopolitan places where I don't know, but that's not the question where it happens or if it happens like really that frequently. From my experience and I've been dealing with these issues for a long time now, and I heard a lot of stories from my colleagues, and it's over and over and over, like repeating itself.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it becomes a little bit better in certain places, like Berlin, for example, but it's still happening. And the basic reason behind all this, also why less women are there, you had to be kind of tough, I think. And I think a lot of artists who I admire and who do interesting sets or interesting music and who dare playing something unusual, for example, are very sensitive people. People who are maybe even shy, And then, so for your for your creative and artistic quality, you have to be sensitive and shy, but to confront like stupid discriminative remarks, you have to be a tough cookie. So there's a contradiction, and that might also be one of the reasons why there were less women. It was possible and there was a lot of support, but it was also on a regular basis really annoying, to confront like, oh, you're not that bad for a woman. And I heard it's still happening. It doesn't happen to me anymore, but I heard it's still sometimes the case. And this prevalent skepticism is one of the reasons. Financial means is another reason. The social inclusion is another reason. If you are the only one, sometimes, if I heard stories of women coming into somewhere and they're being looked at, and then they have to be judged in a special way, and then maybe they are accepted, but it's not like immediately. But that is the case also for a lot of newcomers. If people don't know you, they don't accept you immediately. So I'm not saying that some of these things never happen to anybody else than a woman in the scene. But it's still
Well, it's interesting to hear from your perspective because, when I was dating Heather Hart and running Sonic Group, she never really said much about any of it. And she would even refuse to actually play all-female lineups. She didn't want to be involved. She didn't look at herself as like, she just looked at herself as a DJ, and I'm not a woman. And I don't know, she never really mentioned much. Oh, I've dealt with some, misogynist people or whatever. And, but then again, she was connected with us, and I think maybe people could have also been intimidated to say something to her because they know that she was part of our crew, So,
I mean, one strategy to cope with this situation is, of course, to ignore it. Sure, a lot of people do this. A lot of women do this. They say, It does not affect me. In my world, this does not exist. But on the long run, if you don't, if you ignore something, it doesn't make it go away.
So where's your stance on where everything is at these days with social media and just the surge of DJs that have come out of nowhere in the last, let's say 10 years, especially post-pandemic?
Yes.
Well, how do you feel about everything now?
I heard, I was at a meeting of rather young women who DJ in Vienna recently. I was invited. They're doing this kind of network collective thing called Push Network there. And I heard quite a few of them started to DJ in the pandemic years because they had time and they got into it. On the one hand, I think the more the better. Whoever feels like mixing records together should do it.
But don't you ever feel like everybody at the party that comes to see you play is also a DJ now? It's kind of strange.
I had this feeling the best parties where you would meet a lot of colleagues and where you would meet friends who knew what it was about. No, I think it's so much fun to do this. Why shouldn't everyone do it? Of course, but if
they're doing it for the music,
there are some
it's
downsides
great.
of it as well, of course.
If they're doing it for the music and they're really into music and they want to do it, I can't say nothing against that. But I think there's also a lot of people that just do it for the image. They know there's that algorithm on Instagram, and they know how to be. They want to be a star more than they want to do it for the music itself.
But if they succeed with it, what should I do, or what should I say? Then it's about becoming a star and not about DJing, really. And I don't think that type of DJ career will last for decades. You know, if it's based on attention algorithms and looks, it will last maybe for 10 years and then it's over.
I would just hope that it gets a bit back more to where people, promoters and such, are booking people that actually make the music. This is a big problem. I find that there's a lot of people making great music and they don't get gigs because they're not great at marketing themselves on social media, whether it's, female, male. There's a lot of great female producers out there that are not really playing, that
Yeah.
are doing great music and should play every week. Like anybody that makes great music should always be playing. And I feel like that's missing a lot of the scene right now. And it's discouraging for people that are making music to want to make more music or quit their day job, let's say, so they can make music because they have the talent where they should be making the money.
That's true.
If they did this 10 years ago, they would have been playing every weekend,
But I think like the whole party business became a lot harder. Like there's a huge gap between like top tier, top earning DJs and the whole rest of us, where like a few get like crazy fees and take all the money. And on the other hand, you have like an economic difficult situation where people make less money and things are more expensive. So less people go out, less people pay entrance in the clubs. So it's tougher.
It's like the snake eating the tail of the Ouroboros, right? It's I find it's hard to say because sometimes I'm like, these DJs are making way too much money, but if they're pulling 2,000 people on their own name and those people are willing to spend $50 a ticket, then why shouldn't they get a big portion of the money, Why should the promoter pocket all of that money? So maybe they should just charge less money on these parties and everybody should take a little bit of less and help the scene grow a little bit more. I don't know.
Yeah, it's split more evenly.
It's big business these days, bigger than it ever was. I mean, and it was big then, but it's not big in the early 90s really, but late 90s, early 2000s. But it's at a point now, I'm like, there are some people that DJ, they'll play an arena. They probably make more money on a night than I made in my 35 years of doing this. It's I don't know where it all goes. It'd be interesting to see. I still love the music to death. You?
Yes, absolutely. That's so weird. I still love to DJ. Like I have so much fun, like mixing records together and grooving and trying things out. And also, I love a lot of music that is coming out. Oftentimes, though, it's not like in the style that I'm known best for.
Right, this is me. I buy a lot of new music that I like, but I don't find where I can play it out at.
Yeah, so I like a lot of this new drum and bass kind of stuff that is somewhere in between techno and drum and bass. Like Mike Parker did a few records on samurai music, or Rico does some super interesting.
I just got the record the other day, Jeff, from Samurai gave me the copy of Mike Parker.
Yeah. So there's very interesting stuff happening, and I love mixing music. It's a lot of fun. I love CDJs as instruments, so it makes me really happy. The kind of layering I can do with the CDJs. It's just that I don't get booked very often, but I hear more and more people. I thought, they are good, that they're being regularly booked because they're great DJs that I know. And then I hear, like they're struggling. Like a lot of people are struggling right now, it seems.
It's a tough time for people, especially a lot of people that are, like I said, are making music, and it's hard if you're not good at social media, and you don't. It's almost like a pay to play scheme. You have to pay to get in, and it's
upside down.
Are you nostalgic for old music at all? Do you find yourself listening to older techno?
Not at all. No.
Okay.
Like 2 years ago, the flat where I live was being renovated completely, and it had to be emptied completely. And I decided now is finally good time to sell most of my record collection. And I had, I think, 9,500 records, and now I have 300. And I'm so happy with having like such an overseeable amount of
So you're a
records.
little nostalgic because you kept 300.
Yeah.
Let me guess that you kept all your Underground Resistance records.
I kept the
and
Underground
Jeff Mills.
Resistance records, of course, and I kept also a lot of other records that are not techno, but like my Prince records, for example.
I mean, I find
I'm a
it
huge Prince fan.
hard not to be nostalgic because a lot of the music that comes out is really a recreation of a lot of the older stuff. So I tend to like go back, and
Yeah.
I'm in between both. I love listening to new stuff. I probably like listening to new music more when I'm playing out because everything sounds so big in the house, and I feel like I'm driving the neighbors nuts because everything has such big kickshows now. I don't want to get the bang on the ceiling, but
right.
I listen to. I also like to reminisce on the past a bit too. So I'm a bit in between both. You know, I like going back to the past and move forward in the future.
I'm not very reminiscent, really.
Maybe in a few more years.
Maybe in a few more years, yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Suzanne, for coming on.
Thank you for having me,
Adam. It's always great
to
see you. And we'll be hanging out, I guess, soon again.
Yeah.
All right. Peace, everybody.
Sonic Room Podcast.